Every legend hides a truth. Every myth whispers a warning. Welcome to the Mythic Hour, where the forgotten gods and cursed stories return to life. In the frozen shadows beneath the 9 realms, where no fire burns and no song reaches, sits a goddess forgotten by the living, yet feared by the dead. Her name is Hel, and her story begins now. In the frost-bitten silence of the north, where the wind keens like wolves across mountains veined with ice, there are gods remembered and gods forgotten. Songs echo still of Odin's wisdom, of Thor's hammer striking thunder against the giants, of Freya's beauty and battle cry. But seldom do voices linger upon the name of Hel. Hel, whose realm lies far from the warmth of Midgard's hearths, farther still from the shining fields of Asgard. Hel, who rules where no skald sings, no feast fire burns, and no living man dares tread willingly. She is the daughter of Loki, born of a monstrous lineage. Her brothers are Jormungandr, the serpent of the deep seas, and Fenrir, the wolf fated to devour gods. Yet unlike her brothers, whose stories are etched in prophecy and doom, Hel drifts in silence, half forgotten, her memory eroded like bones beneath glacial rivers. But the dead remember her. They always remember. Her name lingers in whispers where shadows thicken, where the living avoid casting their gaze. For though Asgard feasts and Midgard toils, every soul not slain in valor drifts to her hall. And there, beneath roots and mist, the forgotten goddess waits. Hel was not born into light. She came screaming into a world that recoiled at her form. Her father, Loki, the sly trickster, loved chaos as one loves breath. Her mother, Angerboa, was a giantess of iron will, who bore him 3 children fated to unsettle the order of gods. The first, Jormungandr, slid from her womb like a torrent of scales and teeth, destined for the seas. The second, Fenrir, howled with jaws large enough to swallow the sun. And then came Hel. She was neither beast nor wholly divine. Her body was a paradox. One half of her face and flesh bloomed with the pale, cold beauty of the Aesir, while the other half rotted black, bone and sinew revealed as if death itself had claimed her in the cradle. When Odin beheld the children of Loki, he saw omens carved into their very bodies. The serpent he hurled into the ocean. The wolf he bound, though fear whispered through every knot. And the girl, strange quiet Hel, he cast into the shadows of the 9 realms, banishing her to Niflheim. It was not rage that shone in Hel's young eyes as she fell through the veils of worlds. It was something colder. A loneliness too vast for any child to bear. She struck the ground of Niflheim hard. Around her stretched a land of eternal frost, where no sun touched the sky and no birdsong softened the air. Mist curled like restless spirits over the frozen earth. Rivers of venom and ice carved paths through valleys as silent as tombs. Hel, abandoned and unwanted, stood amidst the chill and listened. She heard nothing. No voice called her name. But the silence belonged to her. And so began her reign in the underworld. The journey to Niflheim was not a fall of moments, but of eternity. Cast out from Asgard, Hel plummeted through veils of reality until the air itself thickened and congealed into mist. The roots of Yggdrasil brushed against her, vast and ancient, their bark whispering with the breath of the countless dead who clung to them like dew. She struck the frost-hard earth with a soundless weight, and when she rose, she was no longer child but something other. The land itself seemed to recognize her, the way a body knows its heart. Niflheim was the eldest of realms. It was older than gods, older than men, older even than the shaping of Midgard from Ymir's bones. Here, ice and shadow were born. Here the rivers Alivagar flowed, their waters bitter with venom, each stream hissing with curses older than speech. The air was thick with rime, the mist seeping into her lungs as if the realm were breathing her in. Hel walked alone through valleys of stone where no grass grew, where the frost carved sculptures more haunting than any craftsman's hand. She wandered beside rivers that froze, thawed, and froze again in endless cycles, their banks littered with bones long since stripped of flesh. Above her loomed skies that were not skies at all, but a ceiling of gloom, the breath of Ginnungagap, the yawning void. The deeper she wandered, the more she felt it, a pulse, faint but steady, deep beneath the ground. It was not the heartbeat of Yggdrasil, but something else. Something waiting. Hel followed it. Through caverns where icicles hung like spears, through forests of skeletal trees, their branches creaking like gallows, until at last she came to a place where the land opened into a hollow vast as the sea. There, a hall stood. Not golden, not adorned with jewels, but carved from shadow and frost. Its walls dripped with the sweat of the earth, its rafters hung with serpents that hissed softly in endless hunger. It was a hole no hand had built, yet it had always been there, waiting for her. The pulse grew stronger. She placed her hand upon the icy stone of the threshold and felt it, recognition. This was her place. The hall would bear her name, Uljner, the damp, stormy hall. Its gates were massive and creaked like ancient doors of crypts, bound not with gold but with chains of chill iron. Within, the benches were long and cold, the hearth a pit of ash that gave no warmth. Here was no feast, no laughter, no music, only silence. And yet, it welcomed her. She sat upon the high seat, her body aching with the strangeness of it all. She was neither queen nor child, neither living nor dead. But as she touched the armrests, she felt her dual nature settle. One half of her face was fair, pale as moonlight on snow. The other was the ruin of flesh, dark and hollow. Beauty and rot, life and death, woven into one. The land seemed to bow to her in acknowledgement. The rivers hissed her name. The mist curled closer, wrapping around her like a cloak. Hel, forgotten daughter, was queen at last. But her throne was empty. For though the realm was hers, she had no subjects. The silence pressed in upon her, a weight heavier than any crown. It would not last long. For death is the one certainty, and all roads, whether of kings or thralls, of mothers or children, would one day lead to her gate. At first, Niflheim was only silence, vast and hollow, a land of frost without form. Hel sat upon her throne in Uljner and felt the emptiness seep into her bones. The mist clung to her skin like breath on glass, whispering faint promises of what was to come. She did not weep. She did not rage. Instead, she listened. And in the listening, she began to hear the stirrings of the dead. They came not in crowds, but in trickles at first. A farmer felled by sickness, his calloused hands still curled as if clutching phantom tools. A mother lost in childbirth, her arms aching for the child who lived while she did not. An old wanderer who had simply laid down in the forest and never risen. These souls drifted through the mists, drawn by the faint pulse Hel had followed earlier, the heartbeat of the underworld itself. Their voices were murmurs, half-breathed sighs that filled the air with longing. They came to her hall. Hel watched them with eyes that saw both the beauty of flesh and the ruin beneath. Some shrank from her, horrified at her half-rotted visage, while others wept in relief that someone, anyone, was there to greet them. It was then she understood her task. Not to revel in death like a tyrant, nor to grant feasts like Odin in Valhalla, but to be the keeper of silence, the watcher of endings. She would be the hand that received those whom the battle maidens scorned. Not the chosen slain of war, but the forgotten, those who slipped quietly into night. And so Hel shaped her realm. She commanded the mists to form walls, veils that would hide her kingdom from the living. She drew rivers into borders, Jol, whose waters ran cold and black, its bridge guarded by the watchful maiden Gur, who allowed none to pass without Hel's leave. Slid, a river that cut like knives, twisting around her land in endless loops. And for Gelmir, the spring from which all waters flowed, boiling with serpents and venom that hissed her name. Within these borders, Hel raised halls and houses, not of splendor but of necessity. To the sick she gave a resting place. To the weary, a bed of frost. To the sorrowful, a silence so deep it mirrored their grief. She named them as they came, with names both sharp and sorrowful. Hunger she called her dish. Famine she named her knife. Delay was her manservant. Slowness was her maid. Precipice was her threshold. Sickbed her bed. And burning anguish her curtains. It was not cruelty that gave these names, but truth. For the dead who came to her carried such burdens, and in naming them, Hel acknowledged what the world of the living had ignored. Time passed strangely in her realm. Seasons in Midgard shifted, harvests came and went, wars burned and faded, but in Helheim, the air was always the same grey chill. And still, the souls kept coming. They came in waves when plague struck. They came in floods when hunger gnawed the living. They came in silence when storms pulled ships beneath the sea. And each one entered her hall, found a place among the benches, and sank into the eternal hush. The dead did not worship Hel, but they belonged to her. And in turn, she belonged to them. She walked among them, her pale side a comfort, her ruined side a reminder. Some she touched with cold fingers, easing the ache from their memories. Others she left to their silence, for not all grief should be disturbed. In this way, the underworld grew. What had been a hollow land of frost became Helheim, a kingdom carved not by swords or fire, but by the weight of endings. And Hel, cast out and unwanted, became a queen. Yet even as her throne filled with subjects, she remained alone. For though she ruled over countless souls, none were her kin. None were her equals. The silence that defined her realm seeped into her own heart, until her loneliness became as eternal as the frost. Still, she endured. For Hel had discovered a truth that even the high gods feared to whisper: the living may forget, but the dead do not. And in their unyielding memory, her power grew. They came not as warriors crowned with glory, nor as kings bedecked in jewels, but as the countless forgotten. The first great tide arrived with famine. Across Midgard, crops blackened in their fields, rivers dried to cracked beds, and families wasted away in silence. The slain of battle went to Odin's Valhalla, feasting in endless revels, but the starved, the thin, hollow-eyed multitudes, drifted downward. One by one, they crossed the bridge Jalabru, its golden span glinting faintly even in Hel's twilight gloom. Mgr, the watchful maiden, challenged them, her voice sharp as frost. "What brings you to Hel's gate?" And they replied with the dull exhaustion of hunger, "We have no more breath to give the living." So she let them pass, and they shuffled forward like shadows, their feet soundless on the frozen stone. Hel met them in her hall. She did not smile, nor did she frown. Her gaze swept over the skeletal frames, the children clinging to their mother's skirts, the men bowed with weakness. The beauty of her living half seemed almost cruel to them, but when they beheld the ruined side of her face, rotted, sunken, merciless, they understood. She was not here to mock them. She was their mirror. "You have known hunger," she said, her voice low, echoing through the rafters of Uljner. "Then you will eat from my dish, and drink from my cup, and find them empty. But you will suffer no more." And so they sat. Though her table bore only hunger and famine, the foodless feast brought a strange peace. For hunger in life gnaws endlessly, but in Hel's hall it dulled, becoming part of them, no longer an agony but a memory. The next great tide came with sickness. A fever swept through Midgard, red as fire, black as ash. Villages burned their dead in pyres until the smoke blotted out the sky, but still more died than fire could consume. The souls drifted downward like sparks carried by the wind, coughing, stumbling, their bodies still bearing the marks of sores and blood. Mgr barred their way, but they whispered, "We cannot heal where we came from." So she let them pass. Hel received them in silence. She did not recoil from their sickness. Instead, she stepped down from her throne and moved among them, her pale hand brushing fevered brows, her ruined fingers tracing sores. The dead did not heal, but neither did they worsen. In Helheim, their pain ceased to grow. "Here you may rest," she told them. "Your breath no longer burns. Your wounds no longer spread. You are mine now, and I will not cast you out." They wept, for in life they had been shunned. Now in death, they were claimed. Then came those lost to the sea. Sailors whose ships had splintered on rocks, whose lungs had filled with salt, whose eyes stared sightless up at storm-clouded skies. They floated down through the mist like drowned specters, dripping, hair tangled with seaweed, the cries of gulls still ringing in their ears. Mgr asked, "What brings you to Hel's gate?" And they replied, "The waves have carried us where no shore will claim us." So she let them pass. Hel welcomed them into her cold halls. For them she shaped chambers with walls that dripped like caverns, where the air smelled faintly of salt, where phantom waves lapped at the stone. They lay down upon beds of kelp and sighed, and though no sun rose over her realm, at least the storms were gone. And so, death by death, tide by tide, her kingdom filled. It was not a place of torment, nor of bliss, but of silence. The dead did not shout or sing, did not rage or rejoice. They simply were. In that stillness, they found what they could not in life, release. Yet not all who came were grateful. Some railed against her, demanding feasts like those of Odin's warriors, or the meadows of Freya's folkvanger. They cursed her hall, spat upon her name. Hel listened to them as she listened to all, her gaze unblinking. Then she spoke. "You scorn me because I am not the gods you wished for. Yet you did not fall in battle, nor were you chosen by Freya. You are mine by truth, not by desire. And truth does not bend for longing." Some cursed her still, but others bowed their heads. For in her words was something undeniable, as stark as winter itself. And so Hel's realm swelled with the forgotten. Farmers, mothers, children, wanderers, sailors, the sick, the starving, all who died without sword or song. Their voices became the pulse that thrummed through the mist, the steady heartbeat of her dominion. Hel sat upon her throne and looked upon her kingdom. It was no golden hall, no shining field. It was silence, sorrow, and memory. But it was hers. And the dead, though they did not worship her, remembered her name. Hel sat upon her throne, cloaked in silence, her gaze fixed on the endless grey horizon of her realm. And though the dead filled her halls, though her kingdom stretched vast beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, she knew she was divided within herself, as much as in her flesh. One half of her face was pale and smooth, the beauty of the Aesir gleaming through her skin like moonlight on snow. In that side of her body, her hair fell long and dark, her eye bright as the northern sky. When mortals looked upon her fair half, they were soothed, for it reminded them of life, of warmth, of the days they had known. But the other half of her face was ruin. Flesh hung slack, grey-green and sunken, her cheek collapsed into bone, her eye a hollow pit of darkness. Her lips were shriveled back from blackened teeth. Her hand on that side was skeletal, her nails cracked like claws. And when mortals beheld this side, they recoiled in terror, for it showed them what they could never deny, death. Hel was both. Always both. The gods had cast her away for this duality, branding her monstrous. But the dead understood better. Some came to her and clung to her living side, weeping with relief at the beauty, the comfort, the gentleness of her pale hand. They remembered mothers, sisters, daughters, lovers. They found in her fair visage the echo of all they had lost. Others could not bear that side, for it mocked what they would never have again. Instead, they turned to the ruined half, staring into the abyss of her rotted eye, and found in it an honesty they had never been granted in life. Death did not flatter them. Death did not lie. And so, Hel's two faces became her dominion. She would descend from her throne and walk among the benches of the dead, half smiling, half grimacing, her duality plain in the dim torchlight. To some she offered her fair hand, easing their sorrow with gentleness. To others she revealed her decayed hand, placing it on their shoulders, and though its touch was cold as grave soil, it steadied them, for in it was truth. Yet this duality was no easy burden. For in her pale side, she remembered longing. She remembered the warmth of fire, the sweetness of mead, the laughter of kin. These memories were not her own, they were echoes, drawn from the souls who entered her hall, but they weighed on her, filling her with an ache for things she had never possessed. And in her rotted side, she remembered nothing. Only silence. Only the hollow certainty that all things must end. To be both was to be torn. Some nights, as the mists curled tighter around Ulfner and the dead lay silent in their beds of frost, Hel would sit alone in the high seat. She would rest her pale hand upon her ruined one, as if to bind them together. "I am neither one nor the other," she whispered to herself, the words echoing against the stone. "I am the living who does not live. I am the dead who does not die. I am both, and so I am alone." But the hall did not answer. Her solitude was deeper than the silence of her realm. For her brothers were monsters whose names were feared in every prophecy, her father wandered between friend and foe, never faithful to either, and her mother dwelt far from her, in the iron forests. None came to Hel's side. None sat beside her on the throne. Yet, though loneliness gnawed at her as hunger gnaws at bone, she did not falter. Because Hel understood something the gods did not, to be two-faced was not a weakness, but the essence of death itself. For death is both terror and mercy, both grief and release, both the cruel end and the blessed silence. And in her, all these truths were bound. So the dead feared her, and they loved her. They cursed her, and they thanked her. They wept at her beauty, and they trembled at her ruin. And Hel endured it all, for she was not one or the other. She was both. She was death. Hel sat in her high seat, Ulfner stretching vast and hollow around her. The hall was filled with souls, yet it was emptier than any wilderness. For the dead did not sing, as they did in Odin's hall. They did not toast with horns of mead, nor did they clash in endless battle. They sat in silence, their gazes wandering into shadows that held no answers. And though they belonged to her, they did not praise her. No offerings burned for her in Midgard. No warriors carved her name upon their blades. No prayers rose to her when sickness came, nor when storms swallowed ships. Mortals called upon Odin, or Thor, or Freya. They whispered to the Norns, they sacrificed and Njord for safe seas, they cried to Frigg for mercy. But Hel, they feared her, and in their fear, they pretended she did not exist. The irony was bitter. For while Odin feasted with his chosen warriors, while Freya gathered her dead into Folkvanger, while even minor gods received offerings, it was Hel's hole that swelled endlessly. Her kingdom grew vast, a tide that could never recede. And yet, no one remembered her. On her throne, she felt the silence like chains around her wrists. Her brothers had their stories woven into prophecy: Fenrir, destined to devour Odin; Jormungandr, fated to poison Thor. Even Loki, her father, was spoken of in both anger and awe. But Hel, her name was a whisper, a shadow, an afterthought. Monster. Outcast. Forgotten. She listened to the silence of the dead and felt it echo in her chest. Was she queen, or was she prisoner? The realm was vast, but the gates were strong, and even the living dared not cross them. She could not leave. She could not roam. She was bound to the underworld as surely as the roots of Yggdrasil were bound to the void. And so, her throne became a tomb. The only voices that reached her came from the living world, faint and distant. She could hear them through the mists, the way one hears murmurs through walls. Farmers cursing her name when plagues stole their kin. Mothers whispering in dread that a child taken in sleep had gone to Hel's cold hands. Warriors sneering that only cowards and the weak went to her hall. Not one voice prayed. Not one voice honored. And so the dead who sat in her hall reflected her silence. They did not call her goddess. They did not kneel. They simply were, an endless mass of shadows staring into nothing. Sometimes, Hel would rise from her throne and walk among them, her cloak dragging over the frost. Her fair side would bend to touch a child, her ruined side to meet the hollow gaze of an old man. She would search their faces for recognition, for acknowledgement that she was more than the void that swallowed them. But they never gave it. For to the dead, Hel was not queen. She was inevitability. They belonged to her as stone belongs to the mountain, as ice belongs to winter. Not by devotion. Not by choice. By truth. And truth was a lonely crown. Still, Hel did not falter. She ruled as silence rules, with neither praise nor rebellion. She watched the tides of the dead swell and fade. She named their burdens, gave shape to their grief, and endured. For she had learned what no other god had, that to be forgotten is not to be powerless. For every soul who cursed her, another soul belonged to her. For every prayer left unspoken, another silence fell into her hall. For every song that failed to mention her, another heartbeat stilled and joined her kingdom. The living may forget, but the dead could not. And in their endless company, Hel remained, a queen unseen, upon her forgotten throne. The Norns spun fate at the roots of Yggdrasil, and even in Hel's realm, the threads trembled. She could not see the loom, but she felt its pull, a whisper through the marrow of her realm, Ragnarok. The doom of gods. The twilight of the 9 realms. For long ages Hel had sat in silence, her throne a monument of stillness. But when the whispers came, the stillness cracked. It began with a tremor. Far above in Asgard, the seers dreamt of wolves unchained, of the Midgard serpent rising in the sea, of fire giants marching from Muspelheim. And though Hel's name was seldom spoken, she too was woven into the tapestry. Her role was not sung in halls nor carved in runes, yet the dead knew. They stirred in her realm, murmuring with voices that had been silent for centuries. Farmers, sailors, mothers, children, all whispered as one, their breath a tide of frost. When the end comes, we will march. Hel felt it in her bones. She who had been forgotten, was to rise at last. For when the wolf Fenrir broke his chains, when the serpent spewed venom upon the skies, when Loki returned to lead the giants, Hel would not sit idle. Her hall would empty. The countless souls who had filled her benches in silence would rise, no longer hushed but howling, an army of the forgotten dead. They would pour forth from Helheim, crossing Joel's black waters, trampling the bridge beneath their feet. They would swarm the world of the living, a host beyond number, faceless and relentless. And at their head, Hel herself. The prophecy spoke little of her, as if the skalds feared to give her shape. Yet the shadows whispered truth. She would rise from Mjolnir half beautiful, half decayed, her cloak of mist flowing like storm clouds. In one hand, her pale and living hand, she would bear mercy, for some who fell in that great war would find release in her touch. In the other, her ruined hand, she would bear doom, striking fear even into the hearts of gods. And Odin, who had cast her into the underworld, would see her power at last. For though she had been forgotten in life, though no prayers had been spoken to her, Hel's kingdom was greater than any in the 9 realms. Not Asgard, not Valhalla, not Folkvanger could compare. For hers was the kingdom that grew with every heartbeat that faltered, every breath that failed. She was the quiet harvest none could escape. And when Ragnarok came, that harvest would be reaped in full. Yet prophecy is a cruel thing. For though she was fated to march, Hel did not know whether she would triumph or perish. Would she stand upon the ruin of the gods as Queen Eternal? Or would she, too, be swallowed by the flames when Surtur set fire to the worlds? In her hall, she pondered. She gazed into the hollow eyes of the dead and asked them for answers, but they only echoed her silence. Perhaps that was the truth of her fate, not victory, not defeat, but inevitability. For Hel was not like Odin, scheming to twist fate's threads. She was not like Loki, shifting form to wriggle free of destiny. She was not like Thor, raising hammer against storm. She was the shadow beneath all things, the silence after all songs. And silence does not end. So she waited. She ruled her realm as the dead multiplied. And though the gods above scoffed, though mortals forgot her, though even the skalds gave her but a line in their sagas, she knew. When the end came, they would remember her name. And in that memory, long delayed, Hel would finally be seen. In the north, where winter bites deep and the nights stretch endless, stories are told by firelight. The skalds raise their voices to praise the thunderer Thor, to recount Odin's wisdom, to sing of Freya's beauty and Njord's seas. Children learn the names of gods as they learn the names of stars, bright and shining. But few speak of Hel. Her name lingers only in curses, in whispers. Mothers hush their children with threats of Hel will take you if you stray. Warriors boast that they will never see her halls, for they will die with sword in hand and feast forever in Valhalla. Kings build mounds for themselves, adorned with treasure, believing the goddess of the underworld will not touch them. And yet, in the silence that follows all lives, she waits. The forgotten goddess does not rage at her neglect. She does not storm the halls of the gods demanding recognition. She sits in Ljnar, her damp and shadowed throne, listening to the endless procession of footsteps that echo across Jalabru. Every child lost in sleep. Every mother who does not rise from her bed. Every wanderer who never returns. Every man who dies not in battle but in silence. They all come to her. And though she is not worshipped, though no feast is held in her honor, she holds them all. The starving, the sick, the drowned, the forgotten. To some she offers her fair hand, bringing comfort. To others she offers her ruined hand, bringing truth. But to all she offers the same gift, rest. In the end, it does not matter that skalds do not sing of her. It does not matter that the living pretend she does not exist. For memory is not kept by songs or prayers, but by the bones beneath the earth. And bones remember. When the last horn is blown at Ragnarok, when gods fall and worlds burn, the forgotten goddess will rise at last, and all will see her. The half-beautiful, half-decayed queen. The silence at the heart of all endings. The truth no one escapes. Her name is Hel. And she has never forgotten you. If the myths still haunt you, subscribe for more tales that were never meant to be forgotten.